Kurt, another week, another pro basketball talk. How are you doing, man?
I'm
How
doing
was your
good.
week?
I'm doing good. For me, summer started. Like summer league's over. The NBA summer has wound down. I mean, hey, Christian Wood's available or whatever, but like, there's not. Honestly, the big shoes that are going to drop and some of the stuff we're going to talk about is probably not happening till September. So I've been trying to spend some time in my garden, being out by the pool, just trying to relax a little bit on top of
Ooh,
getting some stuff done. What about you? What have you been up to?
I don't really know. The garden, though, is a really interesting. So, what's in your garden? What do you got?
Just some look. Rosemary, basil, sage, herbs, tomatoes. Trying to
Wow,
grow some broccoli. I don't have a
good.
big space, but I have a little space carved out. That's kind of my uh, in my backyard. That just having fresh herbs on something, having fresh basil or fresh rosemary in a dish just makes it
I'm sure. I'm
makes it
sure it
instantly
elevates
better.
every simple thing. Like homemade pasta just becomes gourmet.
Yeah, it's just yeah, exactly. Just having the fresh ingredients, when the broccoli comes in, that's great. But like just having the fresh herbs on stuff really just kind of livens up dishes. So, and it's just a little side project to keep my mind occupied sometimes during the day. A little break, go out and garden and weed.
Wow. Okay, that's inspiring. I have a cactus. That is cool. It just kind
That's
of sits
fitting. It's
there.
and if you're gone for an extended period, it's going to be okay.
Yeah, that's what I love most about it. It's very hearty. Yeah, I think what I've been up to mostly is just I've been doing deep dives into like dance, like choreography and stuff. So I've been able to go like tomorrow. Actually, I want to go see one of my friends who's a choreographer, and I went to go see another choreographer recently. I've been kind of just watching people do rehearsals and talking and learning about the art form. And I love dance. I don't know if you knew that about
I
me.
did
It's like
not.
one of my favorite. Yeah, it's like I'm a big fan of modern dance. So yeah, so I used to support Alvin Ailey here in New York for years, and I just love going to performances and going to rehearsal is Kurt is like the coolest thing ever because it's literally just the dance company, the choreographer, like the artistic director, and you, and you're like in this, and it's just like what you would imagine, like I'd be because one time I went to Juilliard, right? And you go to you go to the campus on Juilliard, and you're like, I can't believe one, this exists. Two, I can't believe I have access to this. And then three, like it's just like what you would imagine, like in some Degas painting. It's like beautiful light, the wood floors, and then like the little bar,
Yeah.
and then the huge mirrors, and then just like these incredible athletes come out and just move. Like I mean, it's their ability to
Yeah.
control their body in
Yeah.
space, I think, is bar none. So for me, it's like the coolest thing ever.
I got to see plenty. One of my daughters did dance competitions and dance a lot of lyrical dance. So I do really appreciate it, but I did not know that about you. So we're learning things.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things. So it's like a because one of my old teammates in college at Notre Dame, his brother used to dance for the New York City Ballet and like in the
Wow.
Nutcracker and stuff. So I remember when I first moved to New York, that was one of the first things I got to go see my teammate's brother dance in the Nutcracker. And it was just like this is a different world. I didn't know this existed. So then I started hanging out in the dance world, and it's absolutely amazing. But we want to focus on
Yeah.
basketball. This is not about dance. This is about basketball. And then this episode of PBT Extra, we got a lot to talk about. Everything from summer league to Joel Embiid in Philly. So let's start there. The
Yeah.
process. Now there's reports. We know we've kind of been circling this. Is Embiid happy? Is he not happy? Questions have surfaced over the past few years. And now he kind of comes out publicly and says, I want to win a title, whether it's here, whether it's somewhere else. What were your thoughts when you heard that?
Uh, First off, I don't know that that was new. Like that, he's kind of hinted before. Like, hey, I'm I'm the reigning MVP. I'm turning 30 during this next season. The window's now. Like, and I think that was like this wasn't some harsh new reality. I think this was a reminder and a fairly gentle one, frankly, to Daryl Morey. Dude, I don't have time for a gap here. If you're thinking of trading James Harden for a few picks, we get a nice role player, we flip that into something like I don't have time for that. Like we got to start winning now. He's still got 3 years and a player option, so technically 4, but 3 years on his contract. I, this isn't something that happens right now, but if they really stumble, whatever happens with trading James Harden or not trading James Harden and trying to get him to buy back in, whatever ends up happening with this whole scenario, if this year kind of goes sideways for Philly and they are bounced in the second round again or earlier, we could be having a very different conversation next summer. Like, he does want to win. He does realize his window's limited. And with only 2 years left on his deal after that, that's when the power dynamic shifts, right? Like, suddenly it's like, that's when the player suddenly has the real leverage to be able to say, hey, I don't want to be here, and you've got to trade me or else. Or you could lose me for nothing. And so we'll see. But I wasn't really surprised. I just, we can talk about what I heard. Were you surprised? Does this catch you off guard?
No, I'm very interested. I want to know what you heard. As long as it's cool to share.
The conversation, and I'll throw Dame Lillard in the same conversation for this part of it. Every time I was out in Las Vegas for Summer League, obviously you've been there. I went and watched players, but it's way more networking. It's way more dinners and social events. I
love why they call it NBA Con, the most recent NBA Con, because it really is that's where you go there and that's where you get jobs and that's where you get information. And it's not even about basketball.
No. As I described it to Natalie from NBC, who was out there with me, like, for a lot of us, the basketball is incidental. Yeah, I'm watching games and I will report on them, but it is virtually incidental to everything else going on. I will say this, the topic came up, but the topic was consistently with Harden and Lillard, which is, this isn't getting done until September or October. Like, training camps open, most training camps are opening October 2nd, 's kind of media day for most teams. That's closer to the window. I with Lillard in particular, I think, do you really want to bring him into camp if you've got Scoot Henderson? So, but in the Harden case, there's just a sense that right now, Corey, there's just no pressure. There's nothing to push a deal. And it's not just an NBA thing, right? In life, if you don't have a deadline, if there's not something forcing an action, then the status quo reigns. And I think that's just where it's going to be for a while.
But I do think when you think about Philadelphia, it's interesting because they actually gave this a good run. It's not like they were impatient per se. I mean, they really took the time here. They put the pieces around Joel. So I think Embiid is, I think he's been pretty patient. Obviously, given the circumstances, a lot of things could have gone differently, here or there. But overall, I kind of understand his sentiment. If this is ultimately what he wants, just win a championship, and then after that gets off his shoulders, because he got the MVP, that was off his shoulders. Every year it was like second place, third place. He was right there. He finally did it. And if this is the last thing he feels is on the weight on his shoulders, then he can do whatever he wants in the NBA. Then so be it. I can understand that perspective. But on the other hand, too, Philadelphia, I think you're right. Like, what's the pressure here? If you're going to have Embiid and Harden, you're going to want something substantial, and you have time. So, what's the rush?
Daryl Morey was on the radio in Philadelphia this week and was very clear. Like, hey, I either need a player. He didn't say a Harden level player, but I need a player who can help us win right now, who can be a running mate with Joel Embiid, or I need enough picks and role players that I can flip those into this player. The problem he's running into is that, Corey, how badly do you want James Harden on your team?
Once again, I played the fifth.
Yeah. He's still. I mean, he's still a top 20 player in the league. It's like,
no, I mean, he changed basketball career. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
The guy has fundamentally changed the game. Like, they made rules. Like the way that he was. It's amazing.
And he's still a gifted passer and can score, but he's 33 or will be before the start of next season. You can see the decline in skills. He's going to get paid. I mean, it's not even the $35 million I believe he makes this year. He's a free agent next year. Whatever team, under the rules, whatever team trades for him, you send him he wants to go to the Clippers. They're not throwing their best offer out right now because, again, where's the pressure to throw their best offer out right now? But let's say he goes to Clippers. They can't re-sign him. No team can extend him under the current deal. So now you've got to play the free agent game. He could be a rental, so nobody wants to put too much out there for him. So there's just,
but he
I
kind
don't know
of
that
has
he's
been a rental
gonna get-
recently, anyways, though.
What?
But he's kind of been a rental recently, anyways. Even
Yeah.
when he signs these deals, it's still a rental.
This is fourth trade request in 3 years, something like that. Third team in 4 years. Like, it's not. So nobody's, because of that, it's just hard for Morey's stuck, right? Daryl Morey, the GM there, is stuck. He's like, hey, I need to win with Embiid. I need to get enough back to win with Embiid, and nobody wants to give him that. You can talk about, and they talked a little about bringing James Harden back to camp, and there was some, the through the media pushback, on that, this and that. We'll see. I will say this: if Harden doesn't want to be there, he'd be disruptive. He has proven he is willing to blow up your training camp. So
yeah, and I think you're right about a couple of things with Morey. If his whole argument is I need to get a running mate for Embiid, and Embiid is now putting pressure, and obviously he did this interview with Maverick Carter, and we talk about like, okay, well, who are the people who understand leverage in the NBA and in the sports world generally?
yeah.
I think he's a guy who's probably at the top of the list, if not, very close to the top of the list. So it seems like this is a very well-timed comment, at a panel at a sports film festival that he was invited. I mean, it seems very,
Embiid's been too good at doing this too long to do things on accident. That was not accidental.
So I think that's the first thing. So this is starting, like you said, in a very soft power, kind of ratcheting up pressure, because this is like politics. You're going to have to get like some foreign policy advisor to help with these NBA teams now figure this out. So anyways, the thing that's moving forward here, right, I think, is that if Embiid pushes out and if there's no market for Harden, then Morey then has to basically blow it. I mean, he has to, right? Like either let them walk away or blow it up and say, let's just do a rebuild and redo the process again, which is not a good thing. So I think with the second thing that I want to say, though, is I think pushing back to give James Harden some credit. He has been willing, even though every year he's on a different team recently, he has been willing to take tremendous pay cuts.
Yes.
So as a team, I think that's one good news, is that if you were to sign James Harden, you don't have to pay him $50+ million a year. He has taken $10-ish million discount for the past few years. So he's willing to be a team player if you can keep him happy for 365 days.
Yeah.
But the issue is it's very hard to keep him happy for 365 days.
Yeah. And this whole issue with Philadelphia goes back to that, which is he thought this was he took less last year, turned down his $47 million option, ended up signing for 33. They used that money to get PJ Tucker and Daniel House and D'Anthony Melton, and all this was going to hopefully push them. It didn't work out that way on the court, but he was under the impression, as was frankly most of the league, that this was kind of a wink-wink situation. You take less this year, we'll take care of you. He didn't feel taken care of this summer. He didn't get the offer he was looking for an extension. And now he's frustrated. But I mean, if one were cynical, and certainly I'm not, but if one were cynical, Corey, one would say he wants to go to the Clippers because Steve Ballmer might pay him and not care about the tax. I don't know if that's really, frankly, true, but.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. We will see. Okay, so next I want to ask you about All-Star Weekend in the WNBA.
A
lot of things happened. Big time three-point contest. We talk about this all the time, how the three-point contest is now the new shiny object in basketball, especially in the All-Star weekends. Sabrina Ionescu. Whoa. Did you see this? Like, unbelievable. That shot, like, her shot was unbelievable. I think she shot, for people who didn't see the contest, literally just Google it, YouTube it, whatever you need to do, watch it. It's going to be one of the most exciting 3 minutes of your life.
Yeah, we've got it up at NBC Sports. Yep.
Yeah, and she just does not miss.
No.
I mean, 37 out of 40, 25 out of 27 shots. It was mind-blowing.
It was a better performance than anybody but by the way, better than Steph Curry's record, better than who had 31. I think he and Tyrese Halliburton.
Yeah, they were tied.
Like, it was unbelievable to watch. And the hype, by the way, I got to say this in Vegas. I mean, the hype around the city is definitely there, and the WNBA All-Star hype. It was on the Sphere, which is a whole different conversation about things going on in Vegas. The big Sphere that is kind of the talk of everything now. That had WNBA promo ball, looked like a big half a basketball floating in off the strip with the WNBA stuff. They hyped it up, but it lived up to it. It lived up to the buzz about it because of Sabrina. And like you said, going back to something we talked about now, which is the All-Star game itself was fine. But the skills competition is like the best thing now.
I know, and you know how I feel about this, but I do think what's interesting about, I'm going to say how I feel about it, just because I don't want to make any assumptions. One of the things that I feel is what made All-Star Weekend so great in the past was that people would travel and pay money, hard-earned money, and buy flights and hotels and everything to go to a place like Las Vegas to watch the best players in the world play, right? So when you have people going there and it's more of like, oh, it's concerts and it's, it's fan events and interaction and and the players are kind of just walking through, or you want to see a celebrity game, all the things around the auxiliary things around the All-Star game, which is best players in the world playing basketball, tend to take the center stage. I think you dilute the product, and I think it makes everything worse, which then means you have to double down on the auxiliary products because you're trying to get that shock value, right?
Yep.
So that's my one issue, is I don't think that's very sustainable. I do think the WNBA because remember they're in year 27, right? So they just had their 25th anniversary, and the NBA just had its 75th anniversary, and they're basically programming the same way, which I think is dangerous, because like I said, the thing that made the NBA so brilliant at the beginning was that they had the best players playing against them. So I remember I was reading about this. Brittany Griner at halftime of the All-Star game, didn't she come out and eat ice cream and watch a halftime show? so the element of the show being more important than basketball, I think, for me, looking at long term, I think that's concerning for the WNBA. But the great news is, just like the NBA had Mac McClung, which saved it this All-Star break, they had Sabrina, which saved this All-Star weekend, I think, personally. And I was like, 37. I mean, this is crazy.
Yeah, no, it was exactly that. And now she's challenged. In fact, I want to see this. TNT will put it together for us, or ESPN. She challenged Steph Curry to a 3-point shoot-off, and Curry's like, yeah, I'll do it. So this will be
after his hole-in-one. I mean, it's gonna be hole-in-one. I don't know if you saw that. He had the hole-in-one, and then now he's gonna have this 3-point shootout with Sabrina. Yeah, that was very exciting. That was probably the highlight of All-Star Weekend. And but also just tell me more about this vibe when you were in Vegas, because being on the ground there, and there's so much basketball happening. How much of the attention was on the WNBA?
It started to shift the first weekend, and we'll talk more about this, but the first weekend in Vegas was obviously, it's all Wembanyama with Scoot thrown in, and Amen Thompson looked great, Jabari Smith looked great. So there was real buzz about that stuff. But as we got through the weekend and into the next week, and the WNBA All-Star game started to ramp up, there was a lot more. There was genuine excitement about it. I think that there was a lot more hype, and there seemed to be. But by the time I'd left Vegas, which was before the WNBA All-Star game, there was a lot of buzz. There did seem to be people coming to Vegas to see the event. So
that's fantastic. I was just at Barclays. I didn't tell you this. I was just at Barclays a couple weeks ago before the All-Star break.
Yeah.
And I was watching the Liberty play the Mercury, and Diana Taurasi, I mean, literally was just amazing. she watching her play was like watching Odysseus, do his thing in the Odyssey and the Iliad. She was so cunning. She did this one thing, Kurt, it blew my mind. She did a 5-point or 6-point play. And I just thought that has to be one of the savviest moves ever. She basically baited someone in to foul injury, doing a flagrant foul, get 3 free throws, and then came back and hit another 3. And I was like, she just had single-handedly, she was helping this team, which is a very bad team at the current moment, be competitive. And of course, Brianna Stewart was just unbelievable. But they were at the game. It was packed, which I was very pleasantly surprised, because I didn't know it was a midweek game.
Yeah.
And at Barclays, so a lot of competition in New York City, but they were really pumping the All-Star weekend, and there was there was palpable excitement in the arena for that. So I'm happy to see it translated through.
I think it helps in Vegas that the Aces are so good that there is a genuine excitement in the city. I think people in the city were willing to come out and know that you're going to see multiple Aces in the All-Star game, because that's just such a stacked team. Next year, WNBA All-Star game goes to Phoenix.
Yes. Before we get there, though, did you see the last meeting I want to talk about the WNBA? D Wade bought into the Chicago Sky.
Yes.
And once again, another well-timed announcement right before the weekend.
Yeah. And it was interesting because there was, under the new CBA, NBA players can now invest in, there's essentially a trust fund they can invest in that will help with buy into pools of teams, but also they can invest in some other stuff. Multiple guys were talking about, hey, I put my money on the WNBA the way that league is growing. Like I'd invest in a WNBA team because they see the growth potential of the league. And I think we all do. I think it started to really, really explode in the last couple of years. And like it seems like, doesn't it feel like the whole league is at a precipice where it's going to take off in a few years? And
yeah, like I said, I think we're basically with Asia Wilson and Brianna Stewart. We're kind of in. I thought it was going to be the Larry Bird and Magic Johnson era, but then the Liberty just wasn't. There's not. I watched them play, right, and I think that they are not as good as I thought they were. Whereas the Aces are just really, really, really good, right? So I don't know if we're going to get to that level just yet, but I think they're on the right pace. And if you go back to like the '90s and look at what these teams were selling for, the NBA teams were selling for.
Oh, yeah.
You'll look at it and you'll find 70 million, 80 million. You look at what the Chicago Sky and what recently, these valuations for these teams, the Mercury, for instance, but let's say with the Sky, 80 something million, right? So it's the exact same moment as the NBA was in the 90s, having the same conversations of chartered flights. Do we do that or do we go to the airport? They were having those conversations in the early 90s in the NBA as well. So the league is 30 years behind the NBA in that sense as far as financials are concerned and quality of life. And I really do think you're right. Like these guys realize, I mean, they're buying into, like Russell Westbrook was buying into the Leeds United group with the 49ers.
Yeah.
Right. Like people are buying into Premier League teams. Like you can buy for $80 million, become an owner of a WNBA team, and the product very well because you're an NBA player. I think this is a no-brainer.
By the way, Russ, if you're listening, I'm glad you bought into Leeds United. Get the Americans off the team. I'm just telling you, you didn't choose wisely with some of those picks. I'm just saying. But going back to Phoenix, I wanted to transition because the WNBA is going to Phoenix, but Corey's Jukebox is going to Phoenix.
Yeah, I know. I feel like we're spending a lot of time in Arizona.
100th day in a row or something. But yeah,
I know. Yeah, we're spending a lot of time in Arizona just because it's really all eyes are now on Phoenix, man.
Yeah.
So look, this is my song. This night has opened my eyes by The Smiths. It's a very sad song, but one thing that I think is really interesting is don't necessarily focus on the lyrics, focus on the overall emotional vibe of the song and the title, which is This Night Has Opened My Eyes. The Phoenix Suns just recently did something which the Utah Jazz are closely on their heels, but they are, because all these regional networks are going bankrupt, right?
Specifically Diamond, which
specifically Diamond.
Valley, yeah.
Yeah. The Phoenix Suns wanted to give their broadcast fees, their local and regional broadcast fees, or for free. They just wanted to string games, and they just recently did a partnership with Gray Television to do that. And I just thought, I mean, that's a radical concept because what in the old days, the regional deals for these, like the television deals and the rights deals, was a steady stream of income for 20 years, 10 years. I mean, these long-term deals that give you a lot of cash. And to think that now you have a pivot to the point where a team like the Phoenix Suns, who just got one of the best players to ever live, right, Kevin Durant, like all the excitement, Devin Booker is like a legit superstar, like everything is going perfect, new ownership, willing to spend, everything is perfectly aligned for them, and they're willing to give their broadcast rights locally away for free. What does that mean? So I think what that means then is the night has opened my eyes, and I realized that what used to be a cash cow because of streaming and because of is now basically just a consumer acquisition cost, Kurt. Like I think teams are starting to realize that, hey, instead of trying to make money and put up these blackouts, like we need people to watch our games because then they'll buy jerseys and gear, and then they'll buy tickets to see us in person. And then they'll also probably become, if their mom or dad, uncle, aunt are fans, then we'll get the children and the grandchildren. It'll be like a generational fan base that we're growing. And, it doesn't mind. It's like a marketing cost. We'll just write it off and it just, hey, like we'll just pay all this money, stream it, and we'll make the money up in different ways. And I think that's a radical shift. So that to me is like once you see that, and if other teams follow, which the Utah Jazz are right very close, everything is going to change. Like the whole model is going to change and you're never going to go back.
No, but I don't think, by the way, that's just those teams. Right now, look, there's certain teams, the Lakers, the Knicks, because they own, MSG Network, or parent company owns them, like, that still make a lot of money off of kind of the traditional cable. If you've got a large enough market, it kind of works. But even the NBA in its new contract, like national contracts, what you're hearing is what they want are more games on essentially free, right, on the broadcast networks where you can watch it for free, and then more on streaming, and moving slowly away from the cable package, because Americans are. Do you have cable, Corey?
No.
Yeah. I don't think any. I think especially with younger generations, but I just think everything's sliding away from cable. We got rid of cable. I think that's where things are evolving, because it's the way ESPN financed and made so much money for a long time is not going to be how it's making money. I'm not saying ESPN is going away; still going to have a major role in the NBA. But even within ESPN, like, how they make money is shifting, right? Because it's just, you're not getting that 90% of homes have cable and everybody's paying $5 a month to ESPN. Like, that part of the cash cow, that part of the financing isn't there. So the leagues are looking for ways. I'm really curious if the NBA, do you think the NBA could do something, especially with League Pass, more akin to what the NFL does? Which is, there's a bunch of games on broadcast, but it completely controls the package, right? Every game.
Yeah, that's what MLB is trying to do. The MLB is, they just bought a couple, I think, recently they just scooped up the rights of another team, and they're trying to have one umbrella national rights. And this is baseball, which is like, you think about regional sports, like baseball. That is like the definition of regional, right?
Yeah.
You follow the team and you just watch the Cubs, or you just watch the Mets, or whatever, or the Yankees. So if MLB is thinking about it, that it's serious. I think the NBA also, even with League Pass, my frustration as a Spurs fan. Last year, before they got Victor Wembanyama, I cannot tell you how many games I missed because they were never on TV. I had to get League Pass just to watch the Spurs. Because that's the only way they were on television.
Yeah. That will not be the case this year, for the record.
Yeah, so then get this. My issue with all, like the networks that you mentioned, like MSG or Yes or any of those, is that I live in New York, and even if, with my League Pass, there's still blackouts.
Yep.
Because I can't watch the Nets because, I live in this area. So even then, I'm like, I paid for League Pass, I still can't watch the Nets, and I have to get cable to watch it. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's kind of like one of the issues, is the blackouts that they're trying to resolve.
Yeah.
Because I think, I think ultimately though, Kurt, to me, it reminds me of, because like I said, in parallel, exactly what happened in the music industry with Spotify. Before, you had people buying CDs and records, right? And that's where album sales actually mattered, because you could obviously make a lot of money. But then with streaming, if you look at these top artists who, they're making less than a penny on each stream, right? Like fractions of a penny on each stream. So album sales doesn't actually translate to like actual money for a lot of these artists anymore. Just like these people in television are realizing, like the actors and stuff on strike, they're realizing that you get like fractions of a penny for residuals now for recurring roles on television because of streaming. The way that musicians made up for it is going on tour, which is why this Taylor Swift tour, is such a big deal. Just like why these guys, like Elton John was touring. Like the tour and the merch sales is how you make up for the loss in album sales. But I don't know how you do that in sports.
So really,
other than tickets, for like the actual live events. But that's why I think that this is why you say, okay, stream everything for free, get as many fans as possible, and then if they really love the sport, they'll do what we do for touring, which is they'll come to New York and watch the Liberty game. They'll come to Arizona and watch the game in person.
I think you'll also see more of the second stream stuff. The Clippers are already doing it. There's a Clipper broadcast where they bring in ex-Clippers who, it's a second screen thing where you're watching the game in one hand, they're watching it with you and commenting and telling stories. Manning cast, essentially, except for Clippers. I think there's going to be a lot more of that, right? Like that's a way you can get guys into. So I am glad though you picked one of the more depressing Smith songs as opposed to their album of uplifting, chipper.
Yeah, there are so many options with Morrissey and Johnny Marr. I was like, there's so many ways to feel inspired. So, so I decided to pick one of the more depressing ones. But let's move on to Kurt's corner. We know about this NBA Cup. Very exciting news.
Yeah.
It was actually previewed in the WNBA with this idea of the Commissioner's Cup. The whole idea comes from European leagues where you have something like Champions League, in the middle of your season. So first of all, would you like to explain the concept of the in-season tournament, maybe for everyone listening if they're not up to date?
Yeah, and this is something I've written a lot about and went to press conferences at. They were NBA is pushing it hard and pushed it a lot in Vegas, but they made some of the architects of it, Evan Walsh, some of the people available, which was good. So you could see the evolution of how they got there. How it's going to work is starting in November, every Tuesday and Friday night, and except for election night when they're dark, Tuesday and Friday night, those games are going to be only Commissioners. What are they calling it? League Cup? Commissioners.
They're calling it NBA Cup.
NBA Cup. Sorry, it will have a different name if it succeeds. This is the safe name for now. The NBA Cup. Every game on Tuesday, every game on Friday will count. We'll call it double if you want, but these are all regular season games. Every game up to the championship game counts as a regular season game towards the 82. But these games kind of count separately in standings. They are putting every team in the West and in the East into one of 6, 3 in the West, 3 in the East, 5-team groups. So you play 4 games in your group. And they seeded those with somebody from the top 3 last year, somebody from the middle 3, on down. So it's supposed to be a balanced group of 5. You play the other 4 teams in that group on those nights. The winner of each group plus 1 wild card from each conference advances to a 16-team knockout tournament, with the final 4 games being played in Las Vegas, December 7th and 9th. I think, and we can go through the groups a little bit if you want, but I think what works about this is that there's a certain, after all the iterations they went through, this is a certain no harm, no foul to this, which is they're all regular season games. So we're going to play them anyway, right? So now you're putting this second layer on top, and it doesn't work. It does work. It motivates fans. It doesn't really affect anything. The 2 teams that reach the finals will play an 83rd game. That those games do not count towards regular season stats or anything else. But it basically, I would say the game doesn't exist, but they'll take it seriously because guys are competitive. And
there's a prize.
There is, and you get the winning team gets $500,000 per player. Which, look, you can laugh and scoff and say, "Hey, let's say Denver makes it. Like Jokic, $500,000 is a drop in the bucket to him, right? Sort of less than a game check. But for the guys at the end of the bench and the guys they would be playing for, if you're on a veteran minimum contract and you're making, or you were a 2nd round pick and you're making 1.4 this year, which is, I don't want to dismiss like $1.4 million. It's nothing, but that $500,000 is huge for you. And those guys are going to have motivation, and the stars of the team will want to be motivated for them. So I think it works. I think in the sense that you're going to go through these groups. I think, by the way, if the winners of the group play, if there was one team when I looked at the group where I said they got off light, it's the Celtics.
Yeah, I agree.
It's the Celtics kind of, because it's the Nets, who were good last year because they had Kevin Durant for much of the season, but certainly won't be this year. The Raptors, no Fred VanVleet. They're in flux. We'll see if Pascal Siakam is there when the season starts. The Bulls aren't very good. And frankly, if you told me that the Magic were the 2nd best team in this group after watching them in Vegas, I wouldn't be crazy, because Paolo Banchero's ready to take a step forward, and I liked Anthony Black, and anyway.
They got lucky with that group. Let's just say that.
That's it. The Celtics, though, should coast through. There's some tougher groups. The Nuggets, Clippers, Pelicans, Mavericks, and Rockets are a group. The Rockets are going to be better. They're not bad. not convinced they're a playoff team, but they're better with Fred VanVleet and everything. I mean, the Pelicans, if they're healthy, Clippers, if they're healthy.
This is early in the season, so they might actually be. That's a good point.
Exactly. Dallas still got Luka and Kyrie. Like, that's a loaded group for the Nuggets. So, but anyway, we'll see how much interest it generates.
Think about this name. So that you said the NBA Cup, people were criticizing the lack of creativity.
Yeah.
But I mean, even so. Anyway, so tell me.
I think what will happen if this takes off is it'll be the David Stern Cup, but they don't want to. If you attach that name to it, then you're stuck with it. And if this doesn't work, and nobody knows for sure, I think they've done as good a job as they can putting a program together that, look, it doesn't impact the regular season much. It creates a little interest. I like the idea a lot. I think one of the smartest things they did, and reportedly this came from, was it Chris Paul? I think it was Chris Paul. It was one of the players from the players' side who came and said, hey, the problem with the Commissioner's Cup and the WNBA is that I don't know when the games are and I don't know what they are. So saying, hey, every Tuesday and Friday night is NBA Cup games. Like, okay, then I know, right? Then I know that they count double. I can kind of pay attention. I think it creates a little more interest. So I think that we'll see. I think it's,
from my perspective, I think the NBA Cup, I think it's a great name. And it's funny because
they'll eventually call it the Stern Cup if it takes off. But I think they did a good job of, don't you feel like, we'll see if it works, but it feels like there will be some interest. There was more, I'll just say based on our traffic, there was interest in people really curious about it.
Yeah. I mean, for me, this is the way I see it. First of all, I think it's a great name because, the NBA Finals, in the NBA Finals MVP, like, to me, that's straightforward. It is what it is. It's the NBA Finals, and it's awesome. So the NBA Cup, I do think what they're trying to do is double down on, like, okay, because I don't think this is for an American audience, quite frankly. Who are the best players in the NBA? All European. Look at the MVP finalists: Giannis, Joel Embiid, right, who was the MVP, and then Jokic, who won the past two before Joel, right? So, like, this is, I think, a very clear play to say our game is the second soccer, if you will, right? Soccer has World Cup. Soccer has European championships and CONCACAF, South American. There's all sorts of different championships that people play within their very long regular season, and they play for their national team.
Right.
We can very easily rival soccer's popularity because we're not going to beat football domestically, right? So I think the NBA is very clear. They're like, we're going to go to the Gulf. We're going to go, to Africa. We're going to build up these leagues in China. And the way that we do that is by speaking, the language of what are you used to? You're used to soccer. So we're going to steal soccer's system and basically use this as an opportunity to brand the NBA the same way you would brand UEFA or any of those Premier League. So I think that's what that is. And then at home, domestically, you're just basically trying to teach American audiences this European format. And so I think so the way to get people excited in America, I think, is just basically, maybe have a glitzy, like, playoff type of idea, in Vegas, because I think that's when we'll see the real excitement of, there's a playoff, and it's just like a contained thing. We saw the excitement around the play-in. So I think they're basically just borrowing that idea to keep American audiences interested and saying, okay, we'll just do a very short play-in tournament in Vegas, and hopefully people will be excited, because ultimately, before the Christmas Day games, I think there's like a dip of interest, right? And then after their All-Star, depending on, like, if your team's really good, then they're not playing like Jokic was resting before the playoffs, right? So it's kind of like, basically you have they try to stimulate artificial interest by doing the play-in game to make sure that people are still interested in watching and that people have something to play for, that the teams don't tank. And I think this is like a way to stimulate interest at the beginning, pre-Christmas. So there's they're building a 24/7, 365 days a year news cycle. The off season is already dominated by NBA Con and free agency. So that takes care of that. It's like a reality show. And then during the actual season, because the quality of games, I think, is dipping, they're trying to stimulate artificial interest throughout the whole year.
Yeah. By the way, quietly, a lot of teams will tell you, or a lot of people, front office people tell you, some of the best basketball, at least pre-playoff basketball, and maybe even first round, it's the first month of the season when everybody's still healthy and fresh, like their bodies aren't as banged up. Like, you get guys tend to be out there. It tends to be a little crisper. The legs aren't kind of tired from the long season. So I'm with you on this. They've said quietly, like, hey, we're going to do this for 3 years, 4 years, and see what it looks like, and then reassess. Nobody's expecting WFAN in New York to not spend a segment talking about Aaron Rodgers as quarterback at the Jets to talk about the Nets' opportunities in this cup this year, right? Like, that's not a realistic. The NBA doesn't even see that as a realistic thing. But they were pretty upfront about this being an international thing and creating a little more buzz and a little more interest. And if we do this for a few years, and when you talk to teams, when you talk to players and teams, frankly, in Vegas about it, and people with front office, their kind of reaction was sort of what my first reaction, which is, where's the harm? Like, it's fine. The way they finally set this up where they're all regular season games, so we're playing these regular season games anyway matters, then fine. Let's do it. And, let's see if they rest guys before the Thursday night games or Friday night games of, hey, Denver's playing on a national game Thursday, then they got to turn around Friday. There's stuff they're watching, but like, they're going to see what it looks like. And because there's really not that much cost to it, they'll see. And when you ask teams, like, are you guys going to care? Their reaction was generally, we're not going to treat those November regular season, Tuesday, Thursday night cup games as anything different than a regular season game. If we were going to rest a guy, we're going to rest a guy. We're going to treat it like a normal regular season game. But honestly, when we get to that final, the final 8, and there's a little bit of money on the line, we might treat it a little differently. We might take that a little more seriously.
I think it's not going to necessarily be the money, because I think, I think for me, what it would be is for teams that are not very good. This is just like the playing game. Obviously, if you're a title contender, nothing's going to satisfy your fan base or your players unless winning. No one that's going to satisfy Joel Embiid is winning a championship, right? But for teams that are like the Bulls, for instance, right? If you can go home and say, look, I know we weren't very good a couple of years ago. We cleaned house. And one of the things that we did, we put ourselves in a position to win a playing game, and then we put ourselves in a position to actually win the NBA Cup. Like, it actually gives people in the lower ranks of the NBA something that they can actually go home and bank and say, guys, like, we're trying and we're making improvements and we're actually measuring our progress. It's not just championship or bust. And I think that's very valuable for teams to try to, keep stars interested in staying a little longer, saying, hey, we can build around you. Look, we won the NBA Cup. We have some momentum.
And I think you mentioned it. Like, I think that somebody mentioned this to me and I liked it a lot. They didn't, if you're comparing it to soccer, it's not Champions League or the FA Cup which are essentially like the playoffs in the NBA, where the Denver Nuggets and Boston Celtics are very interested in trying to win. This is going to be more like some of the minor cups where, look, I'm a Newcastle fan. We haven't won a cup since the 50s. The Carabao Cup wasn't that big a deal. Everybody was all into winning it. And if you're Sacramento and you just busted the 16-year playoff drought and your team makes a run in this thing, you're into it. I'm going to go see it. I want them. I'm pulling this. I've got behind this because we haven't done anything in a while. And they're not the only. I'm just pulling them out. There's a lot of franchises that I don't know how excited Celtics fans would be about this, but I can tell you that there'd be a bunch of cities that would be. So it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out.
Yeah. Let me get your thoughts before we wrap up on Summer League quickly. What were your big takeaways?
First off, and I just got to emphasize this. Victor Wembanyama, like, you get desensitized to height when you cover the NBA, and like 6'9" guys walk in a room and you don't blink, and you've seen the picture of Victor Wembanyama next to your dad, right? It is really, you cannot describe how tall he is until you're like in the room next to him and kind of take it, where even people, those of us who are kind of, like I said, desensitized to seeing tall guys around them all the time went, what? Like, it is.
Manute Bol. We were in the draft in New York, and I haven't seen him around, but I remember most recently, before he passed away, I saw him. He shook my dad's hand, and I was just like, he's massive. Same thing when I saw Yao Ming next to my dad. I'm like, my dad's 7'1", and Yao and Manute make my dad look very small. And then the same thing with Victor Wembanyama. He's huge.
Yeah. I will go run through a couple guys who look. Jabari Smith looked like ready for a step forward. Amen Thompson looked promising. Scoot Henderson, I was high on. Let's talk about a couple guys who were not necessarily on everybody's radar, who fell down the board, who I really liked. And I'll start with another Spur. Everybody went to watch Wembanyama. Dominic Barlow, undrafted a year ago, out of overtime elite, got a two-way with the Spurs last year. I think he could be something. I think he could be a rotation guy as a kind of another big around Wembanyama. He looked really good out there. Deserved to me more than a two-way, and he hasn't been snapped up as of us recording this, and I'm not sure where he's going to land or with whom, but like Mike Barlow looked like somebody who could create off the dribble a little, just deserves more than a two-way. A lot of people mentioned it, but I'll throw it out. Keontae George for the Jazz out of Baylor. That guy's a bucket, man.
Yeah. He's very
59 points in the first two. The other guy I will really quickly say, Jarris Walker. Another guy, look, saw him a lot in college, but NBA ready body, versatile. He looks ready to back up Obi Toppin in Indiana starting this season at the 4 and maybe evolve into that role. Much more nimble and versatile than I was kind of expecting. I wasn't sure what to look outside of the fact that he comes in ready to play NFL linebacker. Like he is ready to pound inside, man. He is a big guy. And one more, Cam Whitmore obviously gets mentioned. Not sneaking up on anybody, but he won, Summer League MVP. But I kept watching him. You saw a lot of Rockets games. Kept watching him thinking, how come nobody I get it. All right. Whatever the red flags were, and you didn't want to draft him at 5 or 7. Once you got into the teens, how did he fall to 20? Like, how did somebody not think, man, I'll take a flyer because he's good. And one more, Orlando Robinson, who was kind of on the fringes of the Heat a lot with their G League team last year in Miami. We didn't see him during the finals, but they got rid of Yurtseven. They're looking for some depth. He's looked like a guy who could step in and give. He's one of those guys who suddenly you're like, that guy can play a little bit. That guy looks good. Oh, he's with the Heat. Shoot, you know what? He's going to come out next year and give them a bunch of quality minutes. So keep an eye on Orlando Robinson.
Thank you for the rundown. And last but not least, every time we do this, we like to end with something interesting, a little fun, a little Mad Libs. So our producer Dan asked, if the All-Star weekend for MLB was recently, if you had a pitcher for the home run derby, who are you picking?
That was a good one. I had to think about that for a second because I am not really a baseball guy. You play Little League? I played a little.
No.
Yeah.
I'm very bad at baseball.
I played a little bit of Little League. I was not good at baseball either. But if I had to pick someone, I grew up a Dodger fan. I don't know if Tommy Lasorda can still throw. He used to throw BP back in the day. He used to throw a lot of batting practice back in the day. At his age, at this point, I'm not really sure if he could. But if I can get Tommy Lasorda from about 10 years ago, because not only would he be throwing me batting practice, but I get encouragement. Right? Like I get all this positive love flowing to me. So I'll take Tommy Lasorda.
Wow.
What about you? Where are you going to go, man?
Yeah, for me, I know we're going to lose, and I don't want to be, I want to be hopeful, but the reality is I'm so bad at baseball. I don't know if I can even hit one home run, quite frankly. So I know that it's a losing proposition from the get-go. So I'm going to turn this into an experience. Who do I want to hang out with, for a weekend in Seattle? I'm going to pick like a university president. I don't know if you spend a lot of time with like university presidents, but I mean, when I was in college in student government, you meet university presidents and stuff and other student government people. They're very fascinating people. And so I would like to maybe just spend a couple of days just hanging out with someone like, the president of the University of like Oxford or Cambridge, like something like that, and just kind of like just spend some time learning from them, because that's a very hard job. You're an administrator, and but you also deal with 18 to 22-year-olds who are brilliant but young and immature. So by the same time too, they have they're the future, right? So that's one university president told me that. He's like, you don't understand how much power you have if you're an 18 to 22-year-old and you can get other 18 to 22-year-olds in mass. Like if you guys come to me with an idea, I have to respond, right? Like I can't just let it slide. So that the power of organization, of 18 to 22-year-olds is really powerful. So anyways, I would love to hear from the university presidents of like Cambridge or Oxford.
I thought you were going to go with the NBC Notre Dame tie-in on that one because there's an obvious.
Hey, Pete Pavaka, any day of the week. That's like a shoe-in. Any day of the week, me and Pete or me and Jack Swarbrick or me and Father John, you better believe it. Any day of the week. So I look forward to talking to you next week.
I look forward to it. Enjoy your summer, man.
Yeah. You're right. We got some time. 2 weeks from now, we will chat again, PBT Extra. Until then, Kurt, all the best.
Take care.